Hi everyone, welcome to SYPA PhotoDialogue Session 1, an insight into artist process. Hope you will enjoy the artist talk that we will share with you. Don't forget to like Deck and SYPA Instagram and Facebook pages to keep up with the latest. If you guys don't know yet, SYPA submission deadline has been extended till the 30th September. So don't forget to submit your images. At the end of the session, there will be a question and answer segment. So drop your questions into the comment box and we will let the artists answer as many as they can. Okay, so now let me introduce you to the artists that will be speaking today. Okay, we have Adar, we have Sok, and also we have Dave. Okay. All of them are previous winners of SYPA 2018. Okay, so yeah, let's just sit back and enjoy what they have to share with you guys. Okay, carry on, guys.
So I'll go first. Hi, my name is Sok. And today I'll be sharing about a work called Some Pictures of Representation. Drew, I think we can go to the video. So thank you, Deck and Drew, for hosting us for this session. It's unfortunate that we don't have a physical space where we can be passing the book around, but we'll have to make do with this video. So basically, this project started in late 2017, and it is still an ongoing project that I'm working on. And the project observes the use of nature imagery that is being printed and then fabricated in public spaces, especially on temporary hoardings or construction sites that you might encounter out in the public. So what you are seeing in the book is actually pictures of pictures. So the book looks into the representation and the manufacture of nature as a simulacra, and in that way as an approach to fit into the garden city narrative that Singapore has always been promoting. So in this project, it's also thinking about what the reality of nature is and how we experience that nature in a city and in a world today where the artificial is made to be so realistic in our world. So you can see that in this video, the book has a lot of gatefolds that you can open up and then it extends the image further, as well as smaller inserts where you flip and then you might get a closer look or not into the surface that you are presented with. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so while preparing for this session, it gave me time to reflect and organize the process and all the materials that I have, especially like photos that have been sitting in my phone from while I was making the work. So I broadly grouped this art making process into 3 phases of many INGs, continuous verbs, because I feel like art making is this constant act of doing things, even when that doing may not create anything tangible, but it's still an act of something that contributes to the final outcome. So the first phase that I wrote down some keywords will be like the act of walking and observing the natural environment as I walk around the city, and then also to note take the feelings, and then after that, then going into taking all these observations from the cityscape back into indoors and really reflecting with what I have on hand, the pictures, the thoughts, the feelings, and then to also print pictures out. Sorry, can we go back to the previous slide? to print pictures out. And then at the same time, there's also a lot of referencing, a lot of being inspired by materials that other people have created as well. For example, books and also films. So on the right, you can see some screenshots from this film called Westworld. I don't want to spoil the film for anyone who hasn't watched it, but here it's the main character who is talking about how she finally realizes that she's in this world that is created for a certain purpose. And that realization that she had in the whole series really struck with me as well, because while I was making this project, there was also a lot of points of realizations like this. Yeah. Then the next broad phase will be then taking all this inspiration and observations and putting them into actual play, into experiment, into more material-based testing, and to then think about how to work with all these materials to conceptualize something. So while this process may seem quite linear because of the way it has been presented, it's actually a very intuitive and spontaneous process, and it's sometimes very chaotic. Yeah, so now I will go more into how the presentation of this project was eventually a book form, because at the very initial stages, I actually did experiment with presenting them as prints. I played with the scale, played with association of them by matching, but eventually there was just a sense that the pictures by themselves did not really work, and it needed something more. So next slide. I also tried to fabricate the pedestal as a way of trying to mimic that act of fabrication in the public. And then eventually I decided that the work should live in a book form. And I will share more about it in the next slide. So this was the final presentation. Yeah. Okay, so for me, the book really starts out as a structure where I can organize my very messy thoughts, because I think the book form is something that most of us are familiar with. We work with books since we were kids, right? So because of that, it has also become this skeleton that allows me to organize the materials that I have. So the pictures you see here are actually a very quick dummy that I put together with images that were just from my phone, images that I have taken over time. And with that, I started to bring out these images and find associations and connections among them. And this process of trying to make sense of everything that I have eventually led me to focus more onto the fabrication of nature in Singapore. So next slide. So from book as a structure, it turned into a medium where the structure of the book actually became potential points of conceptualization, meaning that I really looked at every aspect of what a book can be and thinking about how that each aspect can actually reinforce the idea or the subject matter that I'm talking about. So in this diagram, you can see like the book has the spine, the hardcover, the end papers, and even with the pages itself, you can also play with gatefolds, with inserts. With the binding, there are also many different types of binding. And even with the structure of the book, it doesn't have to strictly be a binded book. It can be loose sheets in a box, or a lot of other adventurous ways of playing with it. So in the next slide, you will see this some of the reflections that I did back in 2018. I think the text might be too small for you to read, but basically there were a lot of decisions that were made over time, and some of them include like having the images being full page spreads, because having them as a small image with borders just didn't work. It wasn't as immersive as it could have been. And then also working with a very textured paper, which is called Paplin, to kind of serve as this invitation for people to touch and interact with the book. So the experience is actually a very tactile one. And then one other thing that I should bring up is the idea of having pixelations or pages that are just very zoomed into the surface. Because as I was making the book, I realized that it was actually very tiring for the eyes to keep looking at green pictures of plants, even though it might be very counterintuitive because we usually associate greenery with peace and calm. But when I was making dummies, it really occurred to me that it was very tiring to go through. There was just a lot in every picture. So I needed to have some breathing space, and having these zoomed in pictures of just more pixelated or mass green areas really helped to make it a page where you can cleanse your palette. And then in terms of linearity, the sequence of the book, there was also a lot of thinking of how can I sequence it such that the idea actually slowly reveals itself. Because at the start of the book, it may not seem so clear as to what you're looking at. And then towards the end, that's kind of like that point of realization, hopefully, that I myself experienced in real life. So to wrap up, I think for me in translating a project into a photo book, you really need to take a lot, but also take out a lot. So for me, less is always more. And it's always important to think of the book as a medium and allow that medium to be also part of the message. As much as I think there are also a lot of great books out there which uses the book form as a way to hold ideas. But for me, I'm very much interested in how do you push that boundary of what the book format can do and use it to be part of the message. And the second thing will be that in the process, I have to keep reminding myself to make a lot of dummies, because that's really the only way to know what that tangible relationship between you and the book is. So I put in a picture of my dad looking at the book, because I think that relationship between the body and the book is quite important to me. The size, the way the texture of the book feels on your hands, and how it's being carried around, it's all part of this book object. So yeah, I would recommend anyone who wants to try hands at making book to just keep making smaller dummies. It doesn't have to be finished, just sketches with like home printers, or even like cut and paste collage style. You can see one of the image at the top. Those are the very preliminary sequence dummies that I did, and I just used like tape to tape pictures into A4 sheets that I folded. Yeah. So I will pass it on to Ada. Ada, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Hello everybody, my name is Ada. Just as an introduction, these were my works from SYPA. Drew, Hadi, we can play the video. This work is titled We No Longer Follow the Stars. In this work, I wanted to draw the parallel of our street lamps and the stars in our sky. When they both serve as a guide to humanity, in times of darkness. So as we discover electricity and harness them, we might have seemingly over-relied on them and polluted our skies and forgetting that the stars were our original guide. So this idea of reliance, forgetting, and the attempt to remember is something that has been in all my works. So for today, I'd like to share a bit more on the recent project I work on titled My Mom's Ideating. It involves to me a more interesting technique and process with regards to the same notion of forgetting and remembering. So the work my mom lives in Adar Ng is a video installation with CRTs playing videos that I made using a VCR player, VHS tape, and a laptop. So some context, in 2016, the VCR player was officially pronounced dead, so no companies manufacture them anymore. So as it gets harder to find them, digitizing the videos from the VHS tape and have it peer in comparison was to me kind of upsetting. So for this work, I was inspired by this loss in video quality as the transfers were made across the analog and digital system. This work is a result of reading and writing the same video data between analog and digital system in multiple iterations. The work seeks to explore the experience of degradation, misplaced nostalgia, and future and past memories. So, in view of an effort to try to explain my process, I came up with these few keywords, which is searching, and then arriving at a question, and then coming up with a technique, and using this technique to create this content, and finally finding a form to house these works in. So I started this project as a search for my mom. I can play the next video. I was haunted by her image that I bore. Apparently, I'm a splitting image of her. So a part of me wanted to know more about her, more than just the fact that my face looks like her. So I tried, hanging out with my friend's mother to make dumplings with her family. I tried talking and conversing with my family members to find out more. And as much as they filled me in with their memories, I still felt the need to, search for more. So when I found out that we had recordings in the form of VHS tapes, I was quite excited because finally I might be able to hear how she sounded like, how she moved and behaved. And there it began, the process of reading these VHS tapes into this world that has rendered these storage devices obsolete. And next. This project was led by the question, what was lost as we made the leap from analog to digital? This question, however, was informed by the attempt, as I mentioned, to retrieve my mom's VHS tapes into a digital file. So the increasing need for better imaging technology throughout the years has propelled us forward, leaving this old tech and it needs its memories behind. The attempt to digitize the VHS tape and have it played back on my laptop did not look as good as actually watching it on the CRT. So our current holder, the laptop, has made the retrieved videos look quite bad. And it was as though, I was never meant to view these videos on my laptop. And that I should keep the CRTs, if I want to view these tapes in a good light. So this reminded me of a Bible verse where it reads, no one puts a piece of a new government on the old. If not, it will make a tear, and no one puts new wine in old wineskin. If not, the new wine will burst the old wineskin. So, if I didn't interpret this scenario wrongly, in the text, I think it was Jesus who was saying that about a time that was governed by the old law of Moses and a time where his rule began. So he was talking about this new reign and new era. At that point of time, I didn't really understand the interpretation. I just thought that the old and the new and trying to put them together reminded me of this analog and digital system and perhaps their incompatibility. Next. So as a result, I kind of tried to push this so-called degradation of the footage by transferring them across the CRT to the VHS tapes and then to the laptop over and over again. So when I did one loop, it becomes one segment, and with many segments, I edited them into the final video. So it was out of like a stupid pondering that led me to think of this technique. I was just like wondering, if the CRT is a grandfather, how would it look at the current video data that we process? Will it recognize its great grandchild? This curiosity led me to challenge this idea of old and new by reading and writing a particular video file over and over again throughout the old and new holder, which is the VHS tape and the laptop. Next. So the technique of this work is not immediately obvious, other than perhaps the addition of black borders to the video every time it makes a loop. So this addition of black borders is called letterboxing. It's done to preserve the aspect ratio of video as it transfers to a screen of a different aspect ratio. But strangely, it then also becomes a signifier of time and the process of video, signifier of time and the process of its degradation. It also, seemingly forces the image to eventually disappear. Next. So with this technique, I've decided to experiment and test it out with 3 broad categories that I've segmented, which is firstly my mom's life in the images that I found, which are like her 21st birthday, her wedding, her being a mother, and her being like a family photographer. And the second video would be my life in the film of her camera. And the last one would be my experiments of finding her, which was what you guys watched previously, and my dad recounting how she passed. So to me, this was a very straightforward decision, as it serves as a mode of categorization. And within it, I further play with the edit on how it could have worked. So let's go back to video 1 again. Yeah. So in video 1, where it's my mom's key moment in life, this was quite a straightforward edit, where the images become smaller and smaller, as just what you have watched. When it finally disappeared, I edited in a blue screen of bleach with a 1K tone audio. So this 1K tone is what we normally hear during broadcast television channel breaks. So here, I'm employing all these video terms as a language for my video. Yeah. So these blue screens and 1K tones serve as chapter breaks for my mom's life. Next. In video 2, these are like key moments of my life taken by her. So this second video starts with a small color block, and then it slowly becomes bigger, and it glitches into life with images of like my key moments taken by my mom. So then afterwards, it will glitch back into the color blocks, and then you slowly minimize in size and fade out. So for this video, I played and reversed the process of the sequences in my loops, such that it starts with the end and then it ends with the end. Yeah. So the last and third video was a little different. I wanted to add new information or new story every time a loop is completed, such that the first clip will start degrading, and the newest clip added will be the freshest. Narratively, every new clip adds new information, and it layers on the old clip. And with every loop, the oldest clip disintegrate, losing bits of like audio and visual information. So I liken this experience to time passing, with new memories added and old memories slowly disappearing. Next. So in this stage of presentation, I don't have as many photos as sold on my process, but so for this, I tried projecting the image. I tried putting the video into the LED TV instead. However, I felt like the technique and the process that I just explained needed to be hinted at. It needed to be grounded and pay its tribute in some form of visual. So then I decided to put it back into the CRT. So in its form, I was also thinking about memories that reside in this old technology and how I felt that that's where I can experience my mom for real and where I can actually revisit her. So I liken these CRTs to a niche or a graveyard where one goes to remember their loved ones who passed on. So perhaps then in this age of imaging, that this presence of someone is more dear in image and sound than what remains of their bones. So this, in this point, this was the ending conclusion that I had for this project. Next. And it's also good to note that I did not arrive to these topics right at the start, but it slowly revealed itself as I continued to work on the project. So it was really going down the rabbit hole and chasing an inkling and perhaps searching for just the best way to present it. So yeah, this is my sharing. I will pass along the time to Dave.
Hey everyone, thanks Adar. First, I'd like to start off with thanking SYPA and DEC, and of course Ju, which has been behind the scenes all this while, sort of maintaining the tech for us. So thanks so much for going through all of what we're doing for today. The work that I'm presenting for today will not be my SYPA work, but it's something that I just recently concluded in March and April. That has been produced under the guidance of Ian Tay and Chelsea under the Objectives Documentary Award. I'm presenting on it because it's one of these more concise and clear works that has presented me a way of art doing and filmmaking that I'm very excited to present to you. So after this, you'll be seeing like a minute of the trailer just to understand what the film is about, and then I'll go on fully to the concepts and several other tips that I can share, also because of the types of the lessons that I've learned through doing this work. So Drew, can I have the video, please? So, okay, I'm back as the voice of God. Anyhow, this first slide is based on concepts and how to develop your concepts. I think, to be very honest, The Believer started out with a very muddled concept. It was not one of the easiest things to work on. I wanted to work on like 5 to 10 things all at one time. So this goes through that sort of difficulty and that all of us face as sort of young photographers or young artists. I think the very first thing that I wrote there was the importance of statement and documents. Throughout your work, let's say, especially for the Believers, I took about 6 to 7 months to sort of do it. I think I produced like 10 different statements, and they all said different things about different things that I was kind of focused on. And these statements sort of allowed me to glimpse into my own process, especially when now that I look back at it, like what was I concerned with 1 month ago before I shot this footage. So these things, these statements that you write become very important material for you to understand yourself. The second point that I wrote, which is coming to a concept. So I personally find it pretty easy to define it to define by the negative. But when I mean define by the negative, I try to avoid the usage of other people's work, because you create your own work. If you find someone's work that you don't like, it doesn't necessarily produce work that you would like to produce for yourself. But I think the better way to sort of do it is create like a lot of work of your own and start to define for yourself, oh, I'm not so comfortable in expressing in this manner, or I'm more comfortable in the other one. So that's kind of how I started to come to that concept. And the third one, which I wrote as learning how to appraise your own concept. I think I was lucky enough to work with Chelsea and Ian throughout this process. But to be very precise, I think one must learn how to critique their own concepts. And this critique can, for me especially, comes in a series of questions. So a list of questions now follows. How would this look like when printed? How would this look like if shot X by X? So sort of very technically driven, but it can also go to the conceptual. So how does this concept sit? And then what happens if I mix concept X with concept Y? Do I get something new? Does it complicate things a little bit too much? Slowly you start to build a list of questions, and one of my own list is about 200-ish questions. So whatever new concern or new thing that I want to do, I can always start to approach with these 200 questions, and they sort of become my guiding principle into making the work essentially a process of my own. Okay, after this, my next 3 slides is more on like film and like how I feel that film really works. Next slide, please. Thanks. Yeah, I think throughout all my works, there's something about appropriating your own medium. First, we learn how to use it properly. So, for example, like film, we shoot it, we understand the technical. Or if you're a painter, you learn how to paint, and then you start to find different ways to like manipulate it. So to speak more to the believers about this is that I started to try to understand how I wanted to capture the concept of witnessing. That was a very key part of this film. So what happened in the end was that the average clip length became 45 seconds. It's a very observational film. You don't hear the voice of God, nor do the cuts feel like they really sort of interfere with the way that you are viewing it. You are sort of passively viewing it, and you really observe these little small details. The process really is sort of long hours to get one clip. Basically, I could be shooting 5 to 6 hours just to get about like a minute for that video. So it really defies the way that people have actually really thought about documentary video thus far, which took a long time for that to sort of sit comfortably with myself. It was not something that I was like, this is an interesting film to watch. And up to now, I still don't know. I think it's a matter that does not truly understand itself yet. And that's why it's started to become like a pursuit of my own. But generically speaking, I think that appropriating your own medium is a really useful way to sort of get started on both on your concepts and the work and how you want to express your own work. And if you appropriate your own medium, it also gives you sort of an edge, because it's like a language of your own. Yeah. Can I have the next slide? Okay, so specifically on film, keep producing different cuts. So earlier I talked about kind of different statements, but these different statements also sort of interacted with different cuts. And when I made a different cut, because this was a documentary film, I probably made about 7 cuts over the 6 months. These 7 cuts were usually like posited with like blanks in the middle, which meant like, oh, this part's left empty for something. I'm not sure what it is. Let's try to get the footage for it, or let's try to get the visual for it. These become like sort of like playing fields, and you start to build linkages between clips that you would not have already thought of. Second is sound. A lot of us filmmakers, or actually really visual artists, sort of really forget that sound really makes your film. I'm lucky enough to have come from a little bit more of a sound background, so just a real positive note, really take care of your sound, but also really sort of learn how to play with it in the post. Because once you know how to learn to play with the post, you first then know how to record it well. But it also gives you a lot of options. I think when we're looking at the visual landscape now, we can have very different ideas of what sound should be and can be well modified. And third thing, which actually is pointed out to by Sok with through a conversation that we had previously, that film really allows for a lot of control, which is something I'm also sort of dealing with right now. Is how do I release that control, but at the same time still keep it. I think because for myself, film, I've always used it for a documentary sort of point of view or a witnessing sort of point of view. Now I'm venturing into, like, if it's for fiction, how can I get less control or stuff like that. So that's something I'm trying to deal with. And my last slide. Okay. This is sort of like a checklist of what Believers became. But essentially, I think about what I talked about earlier, like having lists. You can question anything that is inside this list. For example, you can question the object, you can question the style, you can question the process, the concept, or the physicality. I want to go more into physicality here. I think that Sok has done a pretty good job on, like, talking about how, like, books became like a photo project, or photo project became like a book. Adar has sort of talked about how her works and her memories and her personal has become sort of film, but also a process that leads to a sort of a sculptural installation, a tech-based installation. For myself, I had a lot of difficulties with regards to the physical installation of this work, mainly because my previous film was a two-screen film, and I felt very scared of doing something in one screen with just audio and just people walking around. There were multiple iterations, but not to talk so much about myself, but more to talk more towards the process, is that these different physical installations that you dream of. So for example, I would have had 4 or 5 sort of like different sketches, sort of contribute to, okay, so what am I missing and what do I have to produce, or what does this physical installation do for me? How does this setup work differently for this work? So I think even if you don't have good, let me retract a bit. Sorry, if you don't have a physical space that you know that you're going to present at, sometimes it's good to mock it up. So one of the good things with especially with photo is that a lot of photographers will, like, print out photos, or they'll mock up like entire, like, physical spaces. And it's not to say that the physical space that you are imagining is important, but it's using that method allows you to sort of glance into what you think works with each other, what you think works in physical space, what you think works when you print it out, what sounds will you put it in, how should people interact with the work. So all these kind of things are more thought experiments that I'm really suggesting throughout your artist process. And that's kind of everything I want to go through for today.
All right, thank you guys for sharing. So okay, let's get back to all three of you. So we have some questions that we want to ask you from the audience first. Okay, so the first 2 questions is actually for all 3 of you. Okay, so question number 1 is, what do you do to get out of the creative block? And followed by, how can you tell when your creation project is finished? Yeah.
Who's starting now?
You can go ahead. Just now you said that you're always stuck.
Yeah, I think okay. Should we go on the creative block question first, or the finished one? Because we have talked about
Creative block.
Yeah, let's do creative.
The creative block.
It's just a process, yeah.
I have 4 different projects at one time. Then they blend into each other, and then they become 2 projects after a while. So I have a creative block sometimes. and then it opens up something else. So that's how I get rid of my creative block. And also doing different, I mean, besides doing 4 different sort of art projects, that projects can be like different personal life, like sort of projects. So I think it's very important to understand that art comes from a very personal point of view, or from something that you're kind of doing like every day. So that's what's important for me.
I agree. Creative blocks. Now I can see I'm having one right now. Previously, I feel like the best way I get out of it is really actually to put myself in a timeline to push myself, because I always give myself some slack, a lot of slack. So firstly, I think a timeline helps for me. But other than that, it's also just doing, figuring out and reflecting. So before I arrive at, using the technique for the work my mom using the dying medium, there is a whole list of so-called explorations that I did, which I tried to touch a bit on one of the videos. Basically, I interviewed, have a conversation with my family members, but also, tried to, because I was working on this project with 2 other friends, I tried to, spend or like have an activity each with their mothers, and also just looking at myself and my shadow, since it was my likeness that started this, my likeness to her that started this project. So I just kept doing whichever and whatever things that come to my mind.
For me, I try to embrace that creative block. I know it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, because sometimes the more you try, then the harder it gets. But I don't believe in forcing myself to creatively produce, because then what you are producing is not necessarily creative. But I will sometimes take myself away from the project. So doing things that are not related to it at all. And it's surprising how when you let the idea sit at the back of your head, sometimes you will find other inspirations from other parts of life. So that's one way. And the other way then is going the opposite direction, which is really doing more research, in whether it's in film, in books, in talking to people. And I feel like all this really helped to generate conversation around the project that can shape the project as well. So yeah, generally these are what I try to do to overcome creative blocks. And the next question was, what was it?
Something about what you decide that your project is finished. Yes.
Yeah.
How can you tell when your creative project is finished?
Yes. It's a very difficult question, right? And I think it differs from project to project. There are some projects that, how should I put it? Because I work quite intuitively. So when the project reaches a form that I think is ready to talk to people, then that's when I bring it out. And then when it comes to a point when the work starts to take a life of its own, I guess that's when more or less the work is done. But at the same time, I also don't feel like a work is done when it is out there, because there will be remnants from the first project that actually overflow to the next project. And that's why a lot of our projects are actually conceptually very connected. Yeah.
Yeah, we had this conversation before, so briefly on text about when things end and all. I think the multiple ends, right? Sort of the gallery and exhibition and sort of an idea and so these sort of defining these different ends help you to sort of clarify what you mean by when the creative project is finished. for me especially, my creative projects really flow one to another, be it a concept or process. Concept being like what is concerned about, and process being how involved and what kind of involvement I am, what kind of involvement that I have with the project. So that's how I sort of define these ends and things being finished, at least for myself.
Yeah, and also I think sometimes when a work may seem finished, there's always a possibility of part 2, and then part 3 and part 4.
It's like part 5006.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it always varies in different forms sometimes. So yeah, I mean, even for me, I think my thread of thoughts can lasted like throughout my years studying ADM until now. So yeah, that line of thought can possibly go on to me forever lah. And for me, when a project is really done, is when I feel that I can tie a knot and put it aside. So I mean, I'm sorry, I'm so metaphorical, but yeah. So it's when emotionally and like mentally, I think that it's done. Yeah. So it's not so. It's probably answering questions in my own head, yeah, or in my own heart. If my works have kind of like accomplished that, I feel that it's done.
I think it's also because your works are very personal, and I feel like a lot of times as I see you conclude projects, it's almost like after you've addressed a certain aspect of your own emotional questions. Yeah. Maybe we can segue to another question.
Okay, hold on. Okay. We have quite a few questions from the comment section. Okay. So yeah. So this is for soap only. So it's from Woong Yuping. I hope I didn't pronounce it incorrectly. Okay. So the question is, when you send the images to SYPA, did you send it as one book, or as one book with the images inside, or individual images? Yeah.
Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Yo Ping, for the question. For my project, I remember sending individual images because the SYPA submission is online, and there's already a very nice form for you to fill in. But for other applications, other kind of open calls, there are variation of the ones that accept physical books. There are some who will take PDFs of the book, and there are some when they don't indicate, I will always try to put in a link of the video documentation, because I think it helps when you cannot send a book over, and it helps them to visualize the form of the book and all the different aspect of that object. So yeah, I would recommend that you also create some kind of video to shoot the process of handling the book with the hand. Gives people a clearer idea of what that project actually is as well.
Okay, thank you. So another one
Sorry.
for Soak. Sorry. You have any questions, Dave? Yeah.
But so your sorry, yeah, sorry, Drew. Your final sort of layout exhibition for SYPA had your book, right? From what I recall.
Yes. It was a book on an easel, and then prints on the wall. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so right. Okay. Okay. From
Next question.
Yeah.
From Shuing, right?
Yes, from Shuing. So, do you mind sharing more about how you sequence the book, and also what's the favorite part of making the book itself? Yeah.
I would say that sequencing differs from project to project, and it's also a way to speak about the subject matter. I have this book here, so I'm gonna. Oh, I think you cannot see, right? Because it.
That's funny.
Okay.
That's
It just like
hilarious.
camouflages, but
The camouflages.
what I tried. Okay, so I had an earlier book called Ways to Tie Trees that didn't have a sequence because they were just loose sheets, and that was because I felt like there wasn't a narrative and that there wasn't a particular image of a tree that was more important than the other. So I left it as loose. But for this project, I created a sequence because I realized that the images that I took have different layers of revealing itself. So there were some images that that you would just perhaps think that, I'm not sure if you can see, cannot.
Cannot.
You would just perhaps think that they are actually pictures of plants. And then there are some pictures that will reveal the entire structure and the background, the foreground, and that will tell you more about the reality of the space. So because of that, I tried to sequence from the front, the beginning to the end, a slow reveal. But I also do keep in mind that unlike the control that Dave has in filmmaking, right? With books, people will experience it differently because, like, usually for me, I will just open the book in the middle, and that might be the very first image that I encounter, not necessarily the first image that the artist chooses to put right at the start. So with sequencing, that was one of the constant struggle that I have. Yeah, because I think the conversation that I had with Dave was that with film, you can actually have a start to an end, and one scene that jumps to the next is already pre situated within the timeline. Whereas for photo books, there's no way you can hold people's hand and tell them, okay, look at the first page, then the second page. Yeah, but I also know that there are a lot of artists who would think of sequencing as making a piece of music or watching a film where there is a start and then a peak and then an end. So I think it really depends on what you're trying to do with the book, and that sequencing helps in trying to tell that message. And my favorite part of making books will be, I guess, looking at other books that other artists have created. Yeah, I think looking at other creations is very much a big part of my practice, and it's always a joy to see books that other artists have created, and how the community pushes the boundaries of what a photo book can be.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so next question. This is for Dave. It's actually from Gwen. So in terms of subject matter, what are the recurring themes or concerns in your works, from the still images to the film? Yeah.
Okay. I don't actually know. To be very honest. Okay. I'll try to answer this to my best ability. There's two ways of looking at it. The first way, at least for myself, has always been sort of rabbit hole-ish. I love rabbit holes. The deeper it goes, the better, because it just feels like I'm trying to uncover like something, and if there's something more to uncover, what that tells me at least, and what I've glanced about that, what I've gleaned from that about myself is that I really like the endless process of searching, and it's sort of something I've always talked about as being an artist. So in terms of having recurring themes and concerns, it might seem to some degree that I am very concerned about how it is to sort of lead life, how it is sort of my process to always find things to get into, and for me that's something that we all do in all our different lives. But to speak at it in terms of concepts, like what I've been sort of exploring, I think there's a lot of living and there's a lot of urban living. A lot of my urban development works sort of talk about these sort of hard to reconcile feelings about how we feel about perhaps being in Singapore, or perhaps the world developing around us. So that's one part of the work. And the second half of my work is very concerned about, let's see things as they are. Let's try to go out and witness things for ourselves. And it is only recently that these two sort of paths have started to blend into each other. That might create sort of new works, new films, new installations, which is the path that I want to go. So right now I'm in that consolidation period, which I think every artist sort of goes through. And for myself, it is a reasonably painful sort of period, because it really is saying to myself that to some degree it's like, oh, I have a work that I want to chase, but I can't do it because I shouldn't be sort of derailing myself from trying to find what I'm supposed to find. But I do think of it in that very grand way, I guess.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Another question. This is for Ada. It's also from Gwen. So she asked, in navigating your exploration in analog and digital and also memory, what are discarded along the way?
Such a hard question. Okay. I like to think that I'm actually quite a hoarder. So I think things are, with regards to memory, I think things are very precious. So I try to keep them. So I have multiple hard drives. So I try to keep everything in my hard drives. But I guess if we are talking specifically to, as an end result, a presentation of our exhibition, I guess I would streamline and choose visuals or ideas that will possibly communicate. I try not to put things that are too obscure, because if it's a personal memory, I try to also have some kind of context or information either in the visual or in the audio to kind of lead the way. So with regards to things that I keep, hopefully things that I keep that I present out in the exhibition form hopefully would be coherent, and things that are a bit not coherent for people consuming the work, I will keep in my hard drive. Yeah, I probably don't discard them. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay. The next one, okay, so this is for all three of you. So this is from Rachel Lin. So the question is, what are some embarrassing but necessary things that you do as part of your creative process?
Wow. And
Embarrassing.
Rachel means like general process, right?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, general process.
For me, it will be, I guess, to go through a lot of struggle and then cry.
Oh yeah.
Is that embarrassing?
I mean, depends on how you see it. I don't necessarily feel embarrassed because I mean crying is a natural part of existing, but I feel like going through that struggle and being very big take about it, like very stuck and having all that emotion sometimes is quite necessary. And also I feel like it also tells you why you are still doing it. Yeah.
Embarrassing.
I think that sort of self-reflexive, sort of embarrassing nature is something similar that I sort of resonate with. But to speak about at least the process of a lot of my works, because I try to be sort of factually based, at least for myself, or factually based or documentally based at least, is that you have to ask a lot of people really weird questions. Like you're really asking for a lot of things, and sometimes you get to sort of these embarrassing situations where you really have to admit to yourself that you know nothing of that subject matter, but you do want to know more. And having that, it started out as embarrassing, and I think that's a very normal process for someone that identifies as a documentarian or has a documentary approach. But after a while, it starts to become something that is important, and you start to value the way that you understand yourself as a seeker or like a question like asker. But it does start out as very embarrassing, I would think.
So that also reminds me of this foray into this work, my mom is still buying medium. I think for the longest time, it's not that I was embarrassed at the fact that my mom passed when I was very early. I think rather than embarrassed, I felt like if I were to dwell on it or make works around it, I would be exploiting my situation. And so it's not embarrassing, it's just the idea of trying to embrace my concerns or embrace myself. That to me was the necessary part of the creative process. Perhaps I guess maybe embarrassed, if I want to think deeper, since the question was asked, was that maybe I didn't want also to be, as a child growing up, didn't want also to be seen as any lesser. Yeah, as any lesser, because you don't have two parents in your family. So yeah, perhaps it's a bit more entrenched in my subconscious, this embarrassment. But yeah, that's possibly the only thing I think about when it comes to necessary.
So would you say that that sense of embarrassment kind of motivated you to do what you're doing today?
Motivate. I think I'm not very sure if I am. So I think this embarrassment is packed so deep in. I think as I make more works, I think what I'm trying to do is to claim back my embarrassment rather than because it's so embarrassing, so I have to do it. It's more of like saying that maybe it's no longer embarrassing, and that that maybe perhaps something so unfortunate or so personal can lend itself to hopefully bigger topics in the future. So it's perhaps this acceptance that this thing that makes you who you are, and you have to try to embrace it. I wouldn't say proud of it lah. I don't think anyone can say you are proud of not having a mom, but I guess it's just embracing that things happen in life. So yeah, maybe that is what pushes me.
I got reminded of a embarrassing situation when I was shooting for the project, because the project needed me to be shooting in a lot of different public spaces, right? And I think Dave can also relate to that. So there was one time when I was shooting in a shopping mall, and then as I was shooting, suddenly a security guard came up to me, and he used quite an intimidating voice and told me that, oh, you are not supposed to be shooting here, and if you continue, I'm going to have to call the police. Yeah. So I mean, at that point, definitely it was embarrassing because it was quite a crowded area, right? But I also felt like it was interesting because out of all the places that I've shot, that was the only place that I encountered some form of resistance. And it's definitely necessary because a lot of what we do has to do with the public space.
It forays into I think the creative projects pushes you into areas that we don't normally sit comfortably with. So when we, I guess, push ourselves towards spaces that we are not used to or not comfortable with, I think these moments happen. Yes.
Yep. Do we
Okay.
have more?
Yeah. So we have the final 2 questions. Okay. Then after that, it's a wrap. So this is for everyone. It's from Yuping again. So I think. So, what do you think constitutes as a good true visual artist, and how it differs from a person who relies mostly on post production? Yeah, something like Photoshop. Yeah.
Mine rely heavily on editing. As it transfers from VHS tape to laptop. Maybe I'm not a good true visual artist. But just kidding. I think that post-processing or not, to me, is the intention and how close this intention is to your project goal, what your project needs. So the project will have its own voice. Yeah, the project will have its own voice. I mean, you have to slowly find the voice and what it wants, but it will have its own voice. And if we put ourselves into the project, like what we deem as like our good skills in editing or good skills in like so and so, without really carefully thinking about what the project is, then it will foray to me into craft more than art. So yeah, so to me this a good true visual artist is that someone who's true to themselves and is true to the work. Hope I'm making sense. Yeah.
Dave, you want to have
I go?
a stab at it? Yeah.
You know I'm going to say mean things. Okay, so conceptually, there's a camera that we take for granted. There's been 50 years of advancement, and there has been every other sensor that has been appropriated. We have already installed Photoshop into our cameras to some degree. When you take your selfie with a Meitu on it, that's definitely Photoshop. So that's one way to like think about it. So good visual is different from good and true. And bad and true, and bad and visual. So I think that there's a very famous some other artist in Singapore said something like that. So not me. I am ripping this. So what I'm really trying to say is that same to what I was presenting earlier, is that if you're sort of able to appropriate that medium and that style, then that becomes your voice, and that also consequently becomes like your work. So the only reason why people have been arguing about it for years is because that they can prove that what they are doing is more true and more like authentic, which might work for them, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work for myself, at least.
Okay, so yeah.
When you say true, Dave, when you say these other artists, which I think also comprises of me in the sphere, what do you mean by true? Or what's your projection of truth to us?
Truth for a long time as a documentarian would be, am I true to this event, person, or things? True to an artist, at least, what I see it as is being true to your process and being true to what you want. And these two will come in conflict all the time. So there is sort of muddled truth, bad truth, good truth, and they all become this nice sandwich of complicated truth. But I think I think it's a very necessary balance, because especially I think for the three of us, we start to see that there is some truth of the matter that we're trying to put into our work, or the truth of others. But at the same time, there's also like truth of ourselves, and like what we want to say. So.
All right. Okay. So let's have the final question for today. Okay. So this is also for all of you. It's from Wihan Yeo. So he wants to know, when coming up with all your ideas, right? So does having commercial value somewhat steer your path in any way?
I can go first. I would say no. I don't start out a project thinking about how the project is going to make money. And in that sense, maybe I'm not a very good visual artist because I still have yet to find a way that is sustainable for me. But I struggle with thinking about art as a commodity. I really struggle with that. But at the same time, I also respect artists who can make their art sustainable by having collectors or having commissions. And I think I still have a lot to learn in terms of how I can balance out my understanding and the process of making it. Yeah.
It's interesting though that so you put it that way, because for the longest time I don't think that I would have pegged you as a person that would have thought art as a commodity. I've always thought of you art as a service, at least to others or to yourself.
That's new. I've never heard of someone telling me.
I mean, if you're talking about commercial, it's either a good or service, right? Or revenue generating or stuff like that. So I would think that you do a lot of service.
I think in a social sense, maybe, because what we do as we create art is that we have something we feel like is important to raise or to talk about. And I guess you can see that as a form of service. Yeah, I'll think about that.
I mean, whether our current economic system allows us to price these services is a separate idea. I mean, for the fact that with all of us on this sort of Zoom call, some of our performing art friends already have to start to ticket online, which feels awkward considering there's hundreds of performances for free that are not live or live. For example, on YouTube. This whole for commercial thing is sort of interesting landscape to sort of deal with and play with. I think for myself, answering Wihan's question directly is that some of my processes allow me to be a bit more sort of quote unquote commercial, or at least to see the financial lifetime of it. So for films, it always starts off with grants and it kind of ends off with awards or distribution. And that's something that is told about pretty much a lot of narrative film and more documentary film like nowadays. So it sort of interferes with it, but I don't think it interferes too much with the concept of the ideas as to what you're saying. So,
I have no comments. I mean, my works are so and it comes from a space that is so personal. I think it's very hard to think commercially in that regard. I guess the only way I try to justify it is through intrinsic value that I get to understand myself and life better. So, yeah, but for commercial, I don't start with that in mind. If anything, any commercial I have ever touched would be to sell small prints online or like to sell prints whenever there's a fair. So, and even that, I feel like it's different. It's different from the art that I'm doing.
Yeah, and for me, I also sell books and prints, but I think we would know that by selling these things, we don't actually make profit. Sometimes it's barely to cover the cost and the time that have been put into producing the works.
It's almost just like sharing it, even though someone's buying it.
Yeah, so I wouldn't really see that as like thinking commercially necessarily. Yeah, but thank you for that question.
Yeah.
But there is sort of like sorry, Johnny. There is sort of like prizes that you get, or say invited to speak at something, and that's commercial value. It does feel that to some degree that, especially in this content generation era, that we're forced to sell ourselves as artists, and then artists kind of packed along with what we consider like content like like creators, and that's where I'm kind of intrigued. Like, where would we all draw the line in terms of what we would accept for money? I mean, artists in the past might have been blamed for accepting a commission that was perhaps unethical. So always for myself, I always wonder what is the line for myself? When can I say I can't sell this, or I can't speak at this thing? It hasn't happened yet. But when we were talking the last time, you were saying that you wouldn't make your works out of a fair one or plastic. So I think that these lines start to draw out sort of interesting ideas of how we alienate our commercial value at the very least, and our ethical lines become our commercial value lines at the same time.
Yeah, you put it very well. And I think it's a process of also making sense of our position within the changes that are happening, whether it's in the medium or in the community. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you, guys. So yeah. So for everyone, we have come to the end of today's photo dialogue. So before we go, we would like to thank the speakers and also all of you for joining us. Yeah, don't forget to join us for the next photo dialogue on the 27th. Same time, 2 to 4 p.m. We have Brian Teo, another overall winner in the youth category for the Sustainable Communities Award. He'll be sharing with us on his thought process of planning for a photo series, and as well as the importance of content in images. Okay, so yeah, thank you Ada, thank you Sok, and thank you Dave for
Thank you,
taking your
Drew
time.
and
Thank you,
Mark.
Drew,
Yeah, no
Mark,
problem.
Deck for having
Thanks, Mark.
us.
CL,
And SYPA.
yeah, and SYPA.
Yes, please submit your projects.
Yes, thank you. All right, see you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Once again, thank you all for joining us. So show your support by donating to DEC at giving.sg/Art Photography Center Limited. Every donation helps us in providing you with more digital content. See you guys next time and stay safe.